Please welcome Professor Hamidul Kabir.
Ahmed Bhai, please unmute yourself.
Thank you, Dave. Mute corrector. Yeah.
Sorry, before while Kabir is starting, prepare his session, I would like to apologize to the panelists of the prior session because of the time constraint, we could not take their opinion. Kabir, you can start sharing your screen.
Okay, thank you. Let me share my screen. Thank you, the IPID Foundation, for giving me the opportunity to talk a few words about post-COVID complications. I think I can be loud and clear to you. Is it there? So
And clearly,
actually, it's a long session today, and sitting in front of the computer online for a prolonged period might have caused some complications with the audience, but it was really a wonderful event. So I don't want to waste time because it's already been delayed and late, and still there are many participants there. I want to go to the topic straight away, and before that, I would like to thank the organizer for giving me the opportunity to talk few words regarding the post-COVID complications. Basically, as you know, that post-COVID complications are long things. And its name is, there is a observational data suggests post-COVID patients may experience a wide range of symptoms. Who is that? Somebody is talking, Maggie. I'm not sure.
Please,
I'm not sure who is talking in the background. Can you unmute somebody who is talking over telephone?
I think
Somebody is.
Kabir, you
I can talk, but somebody is talking behind.
You know, this is my suggestion.
please mute everyone else.
Yeah, that needs to be admitted. Anyhow, so the thing is that a long COVID is illness. The people who have either recovered from COVID-19 but is still reporting lasting effects of the infection, or have had usual symptoms for longer than would be expected. There are a lot of name has been given for these post-COVID symptoms. Some are saying it's a long COVID. Some are saying it a PSC, that is the post-acute sequelae of the SARS-CoV-2 infection. And it is also being called post-acute COVID-19, COVID-19, and post-COVID syndrome. Many names are there. So virtually, it's a huge problem and burden is upcoming in the next months or years following the COVID situation. There are three stages are in the post-COVID situation. Or the acute COVID, there is the symptoms of COVID-19 for up to 4 weeks following the onset of illness. But if the illness continues, the ongoing symptomatic COVID, if it is 4 weeks to 12 weeks, we are saying as a long post-COVID symptoms. And some of the cases, the symptoms might continue more than 12 weeks that develop during or after the COVID-19, that is post-COVID-19. Though there are no widely accepted definition of the stage of COVID-19 recovery. So if we look at the integrated post-COVID symptom model in a non-hospitalized patient stage of COVID-19 recovery, there are some potentially influencing factors. If we look, there are some intrinsic factors which is independent on the age of the patient, as gender, pre-existing comorbidities, as well as epigenetic contributions. And there are some extrinsic factors which indicate as a biological type and number of COVID-19 symptoms. This depends on the psychological factor, catastrophe, social media information, patient empowerment and recovery. All these can influence the COVID-19 recovery. So one is the intrinsic and extrinsic factor, both influence on the recovery. So we look at the diagnosis and the symptom onset. There is a transition phase, that is symptom potentially associated with the SARS-CoV-2 infection. Following the 4 weeks, if it persists, then the patient entered in a phase 1 stage, that is acute post-COVID symptoms. After 12 weeks, patient might enter to the phase 2, that is a long post-COVID symptoms. And finally, if somebody passes more than 24 weeks, that is more than 6 months, that is the phase 3, and which is persistent post-COVID symptoms. So what is the recovery from the post-COVID? There were some persistent symptoms. There's the prolonged symptoms can follow mild or severe illness, and that includes persistent, mainly, which is the fatigue is more, that is 15 to 87% of cases, and there is shortness of breath or dyspnea, 10 to 71% patients. There's chest tightness, 12 to 44%, and some of the patient might have cough, there is 70 to 30%. These are the predominant symptoms. There are the less common persistent physical symptoms could be there in the patient. Patient might continue suffering from anosmia, rhinitis, dysgeusia, poor appetite, joint pain, headache, a lot more dizziness, mild illness, many problems could be there. And there could be also psychological and cognitive impairment of the patients following COVID symptoms. So when we see this after acute COVID-19 phase, when enter the post-COVID-19 follow-up, we can see the symptoms decrease. The other symptoms are decreasing, but keeping the fatigue, dyspnea, joint pain, and chest pain, these are dominating after generally 4 weeks later. These will be the most dominant pictures in COVID patients. Now, what is the overview of how these things happening? If we look, what are the risk factors who will develop COVID-like symptoms more? These are actually the female sex, those having early shortness of breath, and those who are having more than 5 initial symptoms and their D-dimer level is high. Generally, there is some other things which are also involved in long haul COVID-19 symptoms. Those who are elderly patients, high BMI, and their pro-inflammatory markers are more, and functional rehabilitation, or that is the long-term tissue damage. Those who are having cardiac, pulmonary, or neurological long-term tissue damage are there. They might have the chest pain, dyspnea, cognitive. There is cognitive impairments, and those patients who are having unresolved inflammation, like viral persistence, having lymphopenia, gut dysbiosis, and also autoimmunity. So this will be a influencing factor which patients will be continuing with the long COVID symptoms. So what are the predictors of risk factors for long COVID? As we see, those who are the elderly patient, elderly age group of patient will have a more potential to have long COVID syndrome. And those who are having abnormal left test in the beginning, they are having a more likely to develop long COVID syndrome, like who are having lymphopenia or thrombocytopenia at the beginning, who are having more D-dimer level, LDH or troponin I, and also those who are having elevated CRP, IL-6 and D-range coagulation profile, and also the patients who are having underlying comorbidities at the beginning of the disease, like diabetes, hypertension, obesity, those who are chronic smoker, having chronic alcoholism and chronic kidney disease, they are having more potential to develop this type of problem. And also length of ICU stay and ICU ventilation. These are the patients who will likely to develop more than 5 symptoms in the first week of infection, and especially middle-aged female who are having 50 to 60 years, also having more chance of developing post-COVID symptoms. And what is the expected recovery time we used to expect from the COVID-19 patient? So time to symptom to resolution appears, it depends upon the, as I said, the pre-morbid risk factors of the patients, as well as severity of the acute illness. Now, those who are hospitalized patient, moderate to severe COVID-19, the early data suggests a longer recovery course of patients requiring hospitalization. Those who are elderly patients with pre-existing disease and patients experiencing medical complications, and those who are having outpatients like mild COVID-19, the data suggests that shorter recovery of those. However, subsequent data suggests that even patients with less severe disease, even who were never hospitalized, including those with self-reported COVID-19, have often reported prolonged and persistent symptoms. That is the devastating part of the post-COVID complications. Now we expect these type of recovery, we expect recovery time, some symptoms resolves more quickly, like those who are acute symptoms like fever, chills, and olfactory problem, typically resolves within 2 to 4 weeks. But fatigue, dyspnea, chest tightness, cognitive deficits, and the psychological, these are last even more than a month. And there is approximately 10 to 20% patients require rehospitalization. So uncertain endpoint. So the patients reporting symptoms and weeks together can have this type of problem. So UK Official of National Statistics tracked more than 20,000 people following a positive COVID-19 test to determine how long their symptoms lasted. So the National Statistics consider long COVID to be the persistent symptoms for more than 4 weeks that I already stated. So there were several studies which reveals the associated biomarkers, follow-up duration. There was a median of 83 days after hospital discharge. The patient were having many symptoms and the clinical characteristics are there. So general evaluation, how to follow up those patients. Healthy young patients with a mild disease who did not require hospitalization and who is improving. It doesn't require a follow-up visit unless the patient requests it or is a persistent progressing on new symptoms. But elderly patient or a patient with comorbidities like who are having hypertension, diabetes, mild to moderate, not recurring hospitalization, typically scheduled telemedicine or in-person visit approximately 3 weeks following the onset of illness. But patients with more severe COVID-19 disease, those who require hospitalization, they need a follow-up within 1 week, no later than 2 or 3 weeks after discharge from hospital. For all patients with persistent symptoms, particularly those with multi-system complaints or symptoms lasting beyond 12 weeks, evaluation in a specialized outpatient COVID-19 recovery clinic, and if available, subspecialty clinic, the relevant to the patient's specific symptoms should be done. So we need to assess the disease severity, complications, and treatment. And we need to take a comprehensive history of patients' acute COVID illness. So types on severity of the complications is very important, like venous thromboembolism, presence and degree of kidney injury, supplemental oxygen requirement. On these things, treatment strategies and review the discharge medical list also will be required. General laboratory testing for most patients who recovered from mild COVID-19, laboratory testing is not necessary. Patients recovering from more severe illness or for those with unexplained continuing symptom, it is reasonable to obtain complete blood count and blood chemistry like electrolyte, creatinine, liver function test, and serum albumin. Additional laboratory tests that might be appropriate for selected patients, including those who are still having dyspnea or chest discomfort, we need to do the troponin I and BNP and other cardiac marker. And D-dimer is only in the patients who are having unexplained persistence or new dyspnea, or any patients in whom there is a concern for thromboembolism. No need to monitor generally, that we don't need coagulation parameters like fibrinogen, D-dimer, or inflammatory marker. Generally, we don't need to monitor these if unless required or indicated for this. Routinely, this test should not be done. This is a general evaluation. So big slide. I don't want to go on details on this. At a glance has been showing this type of moving to the next slide. So long COVID symptoms, it's surprising what organ is left. No organ is left. It is to touch every organ of the human body. And coming days are coming a big challenge to manage the post-COVID complications, from beginning to neurological symptoms to musculoskeletal, GI symptoms, upper respiratory, psychological, and neurocognitive, from memory impairment to concentration impairment, whatnot. Every system is touched by long COVID symptoms. So it's really a very difficult situation. So what is the problem in the cardiac problem with the COVID-19. There could be post-COVID myocarditis. That's very important issues. And there could be thrombosis, arrhythmia, and a lot of other complications following the COVID situations. There are a lot of cardiopulmonary complications as well. So as we discussed about the risks, who are going to get these type of complications is definitely those who are elderly patients, a lot of comorbidities having, systemic inflammations, coagulation abnormalities, and severe illness and multi-organ dysfunction, and those who are having immobility, having a lot of complications in terms of cardiac problem. We need to evaluate cardiopulmonary symptoms. If a patient is having ongoing dyspnea, that is at rest and exertion, patient having persistent cough, pleuritic pain and wheezing, orthopnea, chest pain, peripheral edema, palpitation, dizziness, this needs to be check a complete vitals and with special attention to SpO2 and perform a complete chest examination. So what cardiopulmonary chest test is required for post-COVID complications? Generally, chest imaging, we need a follow-up chest imaging. Where it recommended? It is recommended only with new or worsening respiratory symptoms or an abnormal cardiopulmonary physical examination. What type of imaging? For most patients, a chest radiography is sufficient. We don't need every case CT scan to be done, but if we suspect interstitial lung disease from severe pulmonary involvement or history of ARDS, we need to do the CT scan in post-COVID follow-up. So long COVID respiratory complications and related sequelae. The findings of fibrotic changes early in the disease suggest an attempt to, in the process of injury following by repairment in the pulmonary areas. So however, too early in the process of the disease to determine if the findings resolve with time or progress to fix pulmonary fibrosis, because it's very early to tell how long it can go, and the fibrosis can be permanent or not. The follow-up period is not yet. There are a lot of trials going on. How many days can persist following post-COVID symptoms and what sort of treatment can be given? It's not yet decided. There is no gold standard treatment for preventing fibrosis yet. So if a patient with unexplained cardiopulmonary symptoms or low peripheral oxygen saturation, despite normal chest X-ray, clinician should have a high index of suspicion for venous thromboembolism. And CT pulmonary angiogram should be done in this case. And there is a thrombosis showing in the pulmonary artery in the CT scan. So we need to do the pulmonary function test. The recommendation is patients recovering from COVID-19 who have persistent, progressive, or new respiratory symptoms. We need to do the pulmonary function test, and we can do the DLCO as well. Routine transthoracic echocardiography is not recommended on recovering COVID-19 patient. It's only recommended for any evidence of biochemical evidence of myocardial injury or myocarditis. Patient with a dyspnea or other signs of heart failure can be done echocardiography. Otherwise, the patient should read when there is a palpitation or arrhythmia, patient require a 12-lead ECG, and some of the cases, if there is a patient having dysautonomia, should have extended Holter monitoring. So the general management for persistent cardiopulmonary symptoms, we used to do the ongoing dyspnea, address the underlying reason of dyspnea, and ongoing cough when there is a patient is having ongoing therapy is generally supported, and needed to use the over-the-counter cough suppressant and inhaled therapy is required. So what about the hypercoagulability? The thing is that the duration of hypercoagulability in COVID-19 is yet unknown. The patient diagnosed with documented thrombosis are treated in similar fashion to thrombosis in patients who did not have COVID-19. Without having any evidence of thrombosis and in whom no other clear indication exists, anticoagulants are discontinued upon hospital discharge. So post-discharge thromboprophylaxis should be considered in major prothrombotic risk factors such as history of venous thromboembolism or recent major surgery or trauma, as long as they are not at high bleeding risk group. So individual with documented venous thromboembolism requires a minimum of 3 months anticoagulant. So what are the complications, other complications in post-COVID? As all of we know that there is invasive fungal infections also is going, and this is an upcoming threat as well, as we, mucormycosis, invasive aspergillosis, and there is invasive candidiasis. So patients recovering. And then when clinician encounter, the patient is again developing fever, shortness of breath, and same symptom like COVID, then it is required to know whether the patient is developing invasive fungal infection or not. So there is a lot of complications coming like COVID-19 associated mucormycosis. And these are the symptoms where the mucormycosis is suspected. And as you know that mucormycosis is a threat in post-COVID. So what are the steps to prevent mucormycosis? We need to be careful keeping the blood sugar and check the COVID or non-COVID, using steroid in a judicious manner. And the most important thing is the clean water and humidifier used for oxygen support, maintain overall cleanliness, and any oral ulcer should be treated immediately. So again, coming to the neurological and neurocognitive sequelae. So there are a lot of neurological complications of acute COVID-19, beginning from stroke, seizure, hypoxic encephalopathy, even Guillain-Barré syndromes and encephalitis are reported. And there is a brain fog. Some of the patients of COVID, they are recovering, having a lack of concentration, that is called brain fog. Post-COVID concentration, memory impairment is being also reported. These are the, earlier I said, a lot of complications of the COVID in neurological symptoms and how to evaluate all these things. So degree of residual deficit and the impact on the patient's functional state should be seen first. And neurological imaging is not required in this condition. In all the cases, we don't need the imaging. Another peculiar complications is orthostasis and dysautonomia. There are some of the patients come to us with a complication. They are tachycardia and dizziness on a stand following. These are also persistent. Some of the patients have olfactory and gustatory symptoms. These are long continued and test disorder could be and needs to be followed up. And management is depend on the, if symptom does not recover in course of times, you need a ENT specialist consultation also sometimes required. So some of the patients also developing renal and hepatic impairment. As these are the acute complications, in most of the cases, the liver and kidney injury recovered, but some of the patients might continue. Those are CKD patients can have AKI, can have worse outcome if those are in ICU. There are also endocrine problems. Some of the patients having diabetes earlier, now after developing the COVID, there is a beta cell destruction after COVID. So their diabetes control becomes unstable and might require more insulin. And some of the patients newly diagnosed with the COVID because of the pancreatic beta cell is being destroyed by the COVID. And also some of the patients can present with the adrenal insufficiency because of the using of steroids and other issues are there also. And the most important problem is the fatigue and functional status. That is also needs to be assessed. And not the least, mental health. And the neuropsychiatric symptoms for COVID-19 patient ICU patients, they are particularly susceptible. Those who are in the ICU, they are having anxiety, depression, and a lot more problems are there. So the mental health is an also important issue is coming after the COVID patients. The patient's severe anxiety and depression, referral to a psychiatric evaluation is needed. There are also sleep disturbance, and many of the patients receive counseling for sleep hygiene, relaxation technique, and stimulus control. It's very difficult some of the patients to return to the work for as well. In general, for most patients recovering from their acute illness, encourage gradual resumption of exercise as tolerated. They should be encouraged to do a low intensity level and slowly increasing activity over the next several weeks. So the patients needs to be gradually gone for the exercise. They should not go hurriedly. So many things are there post-COVID complications. I'm not sure, and lot more complications will come in upcoming days. It's very difficult to address all these issues. Many trials are going on, many follow-ups are going on. Thank you very much for your patience hearing. Thank you indeed for giving me opportunity to highlight some of the issues on the post-COVID complications. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Hamadul Kabir, sir, for your wonderful presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Rumi Ahmed Khan. Dr. Rumi Ahmed Khan has passed MBBS from Chittagong Medical College in 1993. He completed FCPS and MRCS in the year 2005. He is a renowned pulmonologist and intensivist. Pardon me. He's working as associate professor and fellowship program director, UCF College of Medicine, Orlando, Florida. Dr. Rumi Ahmed Khan, over to you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, IPDI. Wow, it is the mother of all webinars. I cannot believe how IPDI, Dr. Professor Wadud, Professor Sahal, pulled this through. It is an outstanding webinar, great long day, and we almost near time. So I'll start. Thank you very much, organizer, for doing the great job. This is a lot of hard work. I can't overstate that. So let's start. Let's share my slide and go from there. We are all lack of time. So my discussion is vaccination. Vaccination is probably fairly non-clinical topic, but we'll try to make it as clinical as possible and try to explain some nuances, caveats about the vaccination thing going on with us. So this is a pipeline of vaccination. There are, so far we have 8 approved and authorized vaccine, 32 are in phase 3 trial, 37 are phase 2 trial, 50 are in phase 1 trial. That is from New York Times Vaccine Tracker. We have a lot more vaccines coming in the pipeline. All our vaccine, what we have done, all our vaccine, except those whole virus vaccines, we have based on spike protein. We have put all our eggs in one basket. They all, so far what we use except Sinovac and Sinopharm, Covaxin, all are spike protein based vaccine. So what is happening here? This is the spike protein. This spike protein helps the virus bind to our cells. As you can say, this is not a one single spike. There are lots of domains and residues there in the spike protein. So we'll go into that in future. But spike protein vaccination are so far 3 different types. One is pure spike protein, purified protein. They purify the protein, they inject the protein in the body. That is the Novavax vaccine. Simply make the protein, purify it, inject it in a way that in a modification so that it will generate an antibody against the spike protein. Then this adenovirus vector protein. The spike protein gene is purified. They find the gene of spike protein from the COVID, from the SARS-CoV-2. Inside the spike protein gene in a harmless adenovirus, and put the adenovirus in the body. The adenovirus produces spike protein, our body produces antibody against spike protein. And the mRNA vaccine, this is newest technology. They designed the mRNA code for the spike protein, wrap the mRNA in a lipid core, inject mRNA in the body, mRNA enter the cell, start producing spike protein. Body generates antibody, immunity against spike protein. When vaccine attacks us, body recognize the spike protein part and attack the spike protein of the virus, thus inactivating. destroy the virus. A little bit about the mRNA system is mRNA for the mRNA portion of the spike protein part of the virus that is encoded in a lipid coating. It put in the cell. mRNA binds with the ribosome. With ribosome is the protein making factory of the body. mRNA sends signal ribosome and a ribosome to the endoplasmic reticulum system, produces the spike protein that release intracellular in the intracellular milieu, and that spike protein attracts the antigen presenting cell and all sort of T cell, B cell, innate adaptive immunity starts working against the spike protein. So far we have this viral vector protein, we have this mRNA protein, we have the whole virus protein, we have a purified spike protein subunit. Viral vector protein is the AstraZeneca, Covishield, J&J. mRNA protein, Pfizer and Moderna. Whole virus protein is Sinopharm, Sinovac, and Covaxin. And protein subunit protein is Novavax. So globally, as of yesterday, more than 2.8 million people have been given at least one shot. That's a humongous undertaking. 2.8 billion people have been given one shot globally in the country. And here in Bangladesh, here we stay. Bangladesh so far, according to the Bloomberg vaccine tracker, 3% people are so far covered. And if you compare Bangladesh, this is where Bangladesh is compared to, this is where USA, UK, UAE are. So we are vaccination-wise, we are, as of the Bloomberg vaccine tracker, we are way down there. Our vaccination started very well, then it looks like due to supply issue, it slowed down. At this rate, if you cannot improve the rate, it will take 10 years to cover 75% population of the country. So this is the chart I took from USCSF IE department. Very, very well-informed chart, gives us about all the vaccines. All the vaccine, their data, where is the publication? Moderna had a phase 3 trial published in New England Journal in February. Pfizer was published in December. Johnson & Johnson phase 3 trial published in January and document. This is where all the vaccines, approved vaccine, phase 3 data, and approval data are available. This is the chart, all the approved vaccine we have now. So from that data, from those charts, what we know so far? Moderna is mRNA vaccine. It's 2 doses. It does produce neutralizing antibody. It does produce type 1 CD4. CD4. The study was done on 15,000 people. 90% it prevents hospitalization, and 97% from severe disease. Severe disease. 94% against milder COVID. This is what Moderna data. Pfizer data, 2 doses, the neutralizing antibody, strong TH1 CD4 response, and also in challenge, they protect from COVID challenge in MACAPS. Study done in 18,000 patients, 100% protective against hospitalization, 100% protective against severe disease, 94% protective against milder disease. Johnson & Johnson, it is 1 dose. It is also produced antibody, produce strong CD4 and CD8 cell. Here, one thing I am pointing out here, you see every vaccine there, mostly TH1, helper 1 T cell. Johnson & Johnson also doing significantly higher TH1 than type 2. This is important, especially in Bangladesh case, when you have more type 2 cell, there are more chance of antibody dependent enhancement. So that's why they have been very sincere about looking for that there's a not TH2 predominant response. TH2 has been linked to more antibody and antibody-mediated enhancement of different viral immunity. So Johnson & Johnson also 100% effective against hospitalization, 85% against death, and 72% to 61% against mild disease. AstraZeneca 100% effective against hospitalization, 100% effective against death, according to the data we have. But we have we are seeing a lot of press reports, but this is from the research we have. And 76% effective against mild disease. A Novavax is the recent one, 100% effective against hospitalization in their study, 100% effective against severe disease in the study, and a 95% effective against mild disease. Sputnik is adenovirus vector vaccine. Sputnik is interesting advent vaccine. It's probably ahead of others. Sputnik is heterologous time boost combination. They used adenovirus AD26 as the first dose. They use different virus at about 85 as second dose. So they used to define vectors for first and second dose. This heterologous prime boost combination is probably giving a better response. Is one of the good things. And same thing we are seeing when we are mixing and matching vaccine, like first dose AstraZeneca, second dose mRNA, first dose AstraZeneca, second dose Moderna. So this is probably from the same philosophy. The adenovirus that prime boost, a heterologous prime boost a dosing may boost your immunogenicity. So these are the thing, and then we have also then the three more came up. Virus Biotech, a Covaxin, Sinovac, and Sinopharm. They're all old technology. The whole inactivated virus. They are showing both. All of them are showing antibody as well as T cell response. All three of them, and they are showing 100% protection against hospitalization and fairly good protection against mild disease in the 70s. Pregnancy. This is ACOG, American College of OBGYN. They recommend pregnant lactating patient should be getting vaccine. They recommend there should be discussion, but discussion is not mandatory. It doesn't have to happen, but it is a patient one. They can discuss with the physician before they take the vaccine. The claims of vaccine-induced infertility is unfounded as scientifically disproven. Women under age of 50, including those who are pregnant, can receive any vaccine. Any vaccine doesn't have to be either mRNA or J&J. They are open to any vaccine, AZD. They should bear up very, very rare risk of TTS, VITT, after this vector-based vaccine. This is ACOG recommendation. Royal College of OBGYN, RCOG recommend their Joint Commission of Vaccination and Immunization that vaccine should be offered to all pregnant women. As a non-pregnant population, pregnant women can receive vaccine even if they have not had discussion with any doctor. So discussion with the doctor is not in the guideline. No need to stop breastfeeding in order to be vaccinated against COVID-19. Women trying to become pregnant do not need to avoid pregnancy. And also any vaccine, both ACOG, RCOG, they have not preferred mRNA over vector-based vaccine, ad-based vaccine, although we have strong paper now on mRNA vaccine pregnancy, but based on Public Health England data, AstraZeneca, AZD1 to 2 vaccine has been very safe in pregnant, same as J&J data in the USA. Now we have a question about vaccine, whether vaccine is protective against those newer variants. We are getting steady trickle of data that the vaccines do work against all the newer variants, including the beta, including alpha, including delta. This is the data we got in last few weeks. This is the this Novavax phase 3 data where they had lots of patients with the P1, with the epsilon and beta and alpha variants, and they showed good response. So vaccines are working against newer variants. And this is, although there has some decrease in antibody, but they are still effective. Antibody relation, they're requiring 8-fold antibody to utilize virus. So they are not as effective as the good old wild type A virus, but they are still effective with much less antibody potentially. We have two things, one for Apollo Hospital in India. They showed that COVID vaccine provided protection over 95% of the vaccinated healthcare workers. So India at the time, this wave came up June 16 report. This wave was Delta virus wave, and they protected 95% people who were vaccinated. The vaccine protected them. Similarly, very recent press report as of yesterday, the Public Health England, they showed that the vaccine highly effective against this new Delta variant after two doses. This is whole thing. After one dose, they may not do. After 2 doses, 2 weeks after 2 doses, full protection. Our vaccine, whatever we have now, they're effective. In India, they hardly got mRNA vaccine. They all got the vector-based vaccine, and they also showed 95% protection in healthcare workers. This needs some explanation why. You know, we talked about the spike protein. Spike protein is not a one single, it's a protein of lots of residues and lots of epitopes. And if there's a mutation in beta mutation here, in alpha mutation here, so it is not a one mutation. So we know the T cell response happens, and this T cell, we know there are at least 87 T cells. 87 T cells our vaccine generates against spike protein. 87. If the beta, the beta variant, they only have mutation in 13 sites. 13 sites, but still there are 50, 60 sites the T cells are working. So similarly, we know that our all infection cause 1400 small T cell against virus, and new study shows more than 100 T cells against spike protein. So if there are even 30, 40 epitopes got mutated, there's still 50 T cells are working against the spike protein. So that's why vaccines are working against spike protein. And we see that this study showed that people who have the old infection, one dose of vaccine give them good result. One dose of, this is 2 vaccines, this is previous infection, and one dose of vaccine give them great result. So immunosuppressed patients, there are some questions come down. We have data that immunosuppressed patient up to only 70% patient had this full immunity after 3rd dose. And they require 3rd dose, still after 3rd dose, 30% people didn't get immunity. And this is a study on solid organ transplant recipient. So this immunosuppressed patient, we need to be giving them 3rd dose, and still there are 30% people who will not be immunized. So we need to worry about them. We need to keep them protected. And so far, there is no suggestion about booster. As of CDC yesterday, we don't think our T cell, memory T cell are protective enough. We have memory T cells, they are still intact from 2001 SARS. They're still there from 1918 Spanish flu we saw in patients in 1990s. The memory T cells are too long. A booster dose is not needed now. And they're working on a pan-coronavirus vaccine. So some data is there. We are getting good data. And we have one slide about this VITT. It's extremely rare. This is the guideline there. I'm not going into detail there. You need to look for heparin antibody, platelet factor 4 antibody via ELISA study, and you have to avoid heparin product. It should be non-heparin product. It should be agatoban or some lupirine, not heparin. The treatment, and the blood clot risks are significantly much lower than risk of blood clot to pills, smoking, and COVID. This the patient should know. And myocarditis. The last thing, there are a lot of talk about myocarditis. Myocarditis is extremely rare, extremely self-limiting. This is what I am going to tell. Suppose you vaccinated 1 million hypothetical teenagers, hypothetically 1 million vaccinated. These 1 million teenagers, 30 to 40 of them may have a mild self-limiting case of myocarditis. As sure as this vaccination will prevent 8,000 COVID infection, 200 hospitalization, 50 ICU stay, and at least 1 to 2 deaths. So that is what, so myocarditis, ACDC did not ask to stop vaccination. Vaccination is going on teenagers. So myocarditis is less of a concern now. So I'm finishing here. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, organizers, for giving me the opportunity to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rumi Ahmed Khan, sir, for your valuable speech. I guess we have our last speaker here, Dr. Hilaluddin Ahmed. Dr. Hilaluddin Ahmed is a psychiatrist and graduated on 1999 from Chittagong Medical College and completed MD in the year 2011 from BSMMU. He is currently working as an associate professor of child, adolescent, and family psychiatry in National Institute of Mental Health, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Dr. Hilaluddin Ahmed, sir, over to you.
Please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson, respected panelists, and the moderator. I am going directly to my talk as the time is short, so I don't waste any time. It's a very great honor for me to say a few words here. And I'm starting with the Thanksgiving, actually. And there are not only one thank, I am giving 3 thanks. First, thanks for such a well-organized conference. Second, thanks is for not forgetting the mental health issues in the IPDI ConvictCon. And the third, thanks in for my personal side for inviting me to say few words in this August occasions. And why mental health issue is important in COVID pandemic. Mind is mind now. Please mind your mind now. This is our talk now. Why mental health issue is important in COVID pandemic. In last year, the New England Journal of Medicine published an article regarding why mental health and the COVID-19 pandemic has some relationship. But before that, in 2017, a book published by Springer, that is the Psychiatry of Pandemics. It is the history of all psychiatrists, all psychiatric issue, mental health issue, and the pandemics. And the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, he said, but the COVID-19 virus is not only attacking our physical health, it is also increasing psychological suffering. The COVID-19 pandemic is now hitting families and communities with affordable additional mental stress. And mental health services are an essential part of all government responses to COVID-19. So this is all our concern about the mental health and COVID-19. And I am showing 2 cases. Number 1, case 1, a 26-year-old young male admitted in a COVID-dedicated hospital, Dhaka, on April 2020, the first wave during the COVID, with mild COVID symptoms, but speaking to all healthcare workers, doctors, nurses, and others of that hospital, and repeatedly asking, who am I, where am I, and I want to go home. The primarily diagnosed at acute psychosis by the duty doctors of that hospital. The psychiatrist later on diagnosed him as a case of conversion dissociative disorder from acute stress, and treated accordingly with assurance, psychological support, antidepressant, and benzodiazepine, and improved the patient within 2 days. The psychodynamics of this case were the denial, fear to separate from others, non-acceptance as a COVID positive, stigma, then stress and conflicts. And the case 2, a 60 years retired government officer admitted in a general hospital with COVID-19 in November 2020. Total hospital staying time more than a month, including 2 weeks in ICU, but not under ventilation. After discharge, the old man changed his personality, talkative than before, irritable, anger, tried to buy a new vehicle, very unexpected, disinhibited sexual behaviors, sleeplessness, buying unnecessary electronics through online. And he diagnosed as acute mania for the first time in his life, treated accordingly. At present, the person is mentally stable after getting the treatment. The psychodynamics of this case too, that it may be due to the COVID itself, or steroid-induced psychosis, or the precipitation of any previous mental illness not diagnosed before yet. And how COVID-19 affects mental health? Because it is the new disease in the era, the fear to unknown. It is the innate response to all, the fear to unknown, the uncertain prognosis. We don't know where it will go. Loss of loved one, fear of contamination that leads to death, and shortage of resources for the health services and other resources, and unfamiliar public health measures like the lockdown, shutdown, quarantine, isolation that infringe the personal freedom of human being. Large and growing financial losses, that also very important issue to develop the mental health crisis. And confusing messages from the authorities, from the national, international, other social media. There are some stigma, myths, and that we call the infodemics. And that is the fear of infection, social pressure, rumor, lack of social activities that increase the mortality, morbidity, workload, and that produce the stress. And it is the vice versa, like that. The stress can produce the increased susceptibility to infection. When the stress, then our immunity also lost. We have some alarm signal, our overstimulation stress hormone suppress the immune response that can again increase the susceptibility to infection. So the stress and the infection, this is a vicious cycle. The stress, anxiety, depression, then it will be a disease also. COVID-19 also affected by the stress, COVID-19 also affected by the anxiety, COVID-19 also affected by the depression, and the vice versa, the COVID-19 also produces stress, anxiety, and depression. This is the COVID-19 and the lockdown, shutdown, or some new measures, some stigma, infodemics. That is the new phenomena. We have some uncertainty, financial crisis, devoid from regular activities in our social life, education, work, school closure, quarantine, isolation that cause stress, anxiety, depression, panic, dissociation, psychosis, domestic violence, sleep disorders, drug addiction, suicide, etc. And in the health service, we have the lack of resources, not only Bangladesh, overall the globe, the lack of resources, burnout of the healthcare providers, they explode their head, and quality of care. That is the questionable during when of the lack of our health services, and a number of healthcare providers have some stress, anxiety, and burnout. And that lack of resources, the oxygen, tika, ICU থাকবে কিনা, আমার চিকিৎসা আছে কিনা, থাকলেও আমি পাবো কিনা, and again one thing is the moral injury of the healthcare workers during the service. Then again the mental health issues to the healthcare workers. And the trauma is the death from loved one, traumatic experience in the hospital and the treatment, acute stress, grief reaction may be the abnormal grief reaction, post-traumatic stress disorder, then again the person has some mental health conditions. And post-COVID era, the neo-normal life, there is the hybrid model of lifestyle. In the education, workplace, everywhere, we have to adjust with the hybrid model of lifestyle, and there again stress, anxiety, depression, panic, and other mental health disorder. So the COVID in all aspects have some mental health consequences. I just want to show some research on COVID-19 and mental health. First, I have to say the published in the Lancet last year, the 6-month neurological and psychiatric outcome in the more than 200,000 survivors of the COVID-19, a retrospective cohort study using electronic health record. 1 in every 3 persons have any neuropsychiatric condition, and 17 to 19% have some anxiety, 1.5 to 2.7 have some psychosis, 13 to 23% mood disorder, and 5.4% having the sleep disorder. It is the large study of the post-COVID patient. Now I'm showing some study in regional and Bangladesh, that is the research on COVID prevalence of anxiety and depression in South Asia during COVID-19, a systematic review and meta-analysis. And this meta-analysis total 35 studies representing 41,000 participants were included in our review. The pooled prevalence of anxiety in 31 studies with pooled sample, it was the 28,000, and the anxiety found 41%. And again, the prevalence of depression found 34%. Among the South Asian country, India had a higher number of studies, whereas Bangladesh and Pakistan had a higher pooled prevalence of anxiety and depression. And we are doing the international collaborative multi-center study within 40 countries. Bangladesh is one of them. And we are our principal investigator from the World Psychiatric Associations. And this is the 40 countries. Data already have taken, and analysis is ongoing process. Another article published on the Journal of Affective Disorder, the COVID-19 pandemic and serious psychological consequences in Bangladesh, a population-based nationwide study. And this study, the prevalence rate of depression was found 33%, and suicidal ideation found among the 5%. The common risk factors for suicidal ideation and depression include the young, being female, being a cigarette smoker, having comorbid disease, having high score on the fear of COVID-19 scale, and having insomnia symptoms. Impact of COVID-19 pandemic on mental health among general Bangladeshi population, another cross-sectional study found the prevalence of loneliness 71%, depression 38%, anxiety 64%, and sleep disorder 73%. An immediate psychological response among the medical student, another study that also showed the 65.9% of the medical student had some different level of anxiety, and 49.9% had the depressive symptoms. Female students had relatively more anxiety and depressive symptoms when compared with the males. And anxiety and depression among tertiary level students in Bangladesh during COVID-19 outbreak, that is the study in the Dhaka University students. The findings were the female students had about 2.9 times more likely to report anxiety than male students, controlling for all other factors. The duration of using social media also affecting the level of anxiety, that also found significantly, the using the social media. And the impact of COVID-19 pandemic of mental health and well-being home quarantine Bangladeshi students, those who are in the home quarantine, that's also found the 4 to 5 times the stress and anxiety and depression from the general population. This is another publication from Bangladesh addressing the COVID-19 related stigma and discrimination, a fight against infodemic in Bangladesh. What are the myths, what is the stigma? And it has published in the very old medical journal that was first published in 1999. That is the Minerva Medica published from the Italy. And the COVID-19 patient commits suicide in Mugda hospitals. And another suicide, Chuadanga cattle trader commits suicide just 5 days back due to COVID stigma after the local administration hoisted a red flag on his residence. What we are doing? Mind your mind now, online training on mental health and COVID-19 for the healthcare worker organized by DGHS. And we have already trained 1,200 doctors through online, and some guideline we have published, training on site and online, and personal appearance on media and social media to create awareness by the mental health experts. One of our panelists also present here, Professor Mohit Kamal sir. He is also very personal appearance in media and social media to create awareness against COVID-19 and mental health. And the Director General of the Health Service also published a guidebook on mental health COVID-19. This is the index. This is you can found in this link, and the index of this guideline. There are some content I am not read out all. This is according to the guideline, the treatment on acute onset of the behavioral disturbance of psychotropics. Which psychotropics we can use in the delirium? We can use haloperidol. Acute psychosis and mania, it is recommended to use risperidone and olanzapine. Anxiety, it is recommended the lorazepam and citalopram by the international body. We are putting this in our guideline. Depressive disorder, citalopram or sertraline, and insomnia, lorazepam, only the short-acting benzodiazepine or the quetiapine in very low dose. This is also from the international guideline. We are put in our guideline in Bangladesh. And this is the relaxation therapy also included in our Bangladesh guideline. How can a person non-pharmacological approach to become mentally healthy? Last, I have to say some few words regarding the mental health issue during pandemic. The common mental health conditions, that is the acute stress disorder, panic attack, adjustment disorder, depression, brief psychosis, and dissociative disorder. But the common presentations of the symptoms, that is the sleep disorders, it is the most common. Attention and concentration also decrease. during the pandemic era for the all levels of the survivors, including the healthcare workers and others, common persons, and the forgetfulness. It is the common emotional and behavior changes also very important. Relationship problems, domestic violence also increase, also found in some researches. And how can we take care of our mind? That is the change the mindset. In home, we are not quarantined. We are not prisoner. Our home is our free. Our outside is the prison. That the change the mindset. We have to constrain our sleep pattern. Like we have to sleep at night and active in daytime, healthy lifestyle, and no to any substance, no to cigarette, no to drugs. Not overwhelmed with COVID-19. Avoid infodemics. Rational use of internet, but maintain communication with others, quality time with family and household activities, special attention to child, elder members, person with mental health conditions. We have to use encourage our hobbies, religious activities, and if need, the consult with experts, take medication according to the guideline. Have a routine, take a deep breath, call a loved one, have fun, open your windows, take some time in your roof or in your balcony and help others and nurture your human virtue. And at last but not least, thank yourself. Thank yourself. We are thanking to others. We are expressing our gratitude to others. By every day, please thank yourself. It will increase your self-esteem. প্রতিদিন একবার করে যদি নিজেকে ধন্যবাদ দেই, নিজের প্রতি কৃতজ্ঞতা প্রকাশ করি, তাতে আমাদের আত্মবিশ্বাস বাড়বে, সেলফ এস্টিম বাড়বে। Thank you all and thank myself also. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Halal. Excellent. Thank you. Really, we are our organizer, really we are proud and all the presenters. All the presenters have nicely prepared themselves and present a nice way. Our program is a high level of person. I see Dr. Professor Soyod Atiqul Haq sir. He's the teachers of all of us here. So, sir, we are really grateful to you. Professor Soyod Atiqul Haq sir, please few comments regarding our sessions. Please unmute yourself, sir.
Thank you very much. And, I also thank you for, maybe three things like Halal. Firstly, I thank you for organizing this nice webinar and very useful. I have learned a lot. And secondly, for, inviting me as a panelist here. That's a proud privilege for me. And also I thank all the three speakers for, very diligently preparing their talks. Their talks were concise, focused, and actually I think I myself and all the audience have learned quite a lot from all the three speakers. So I thank the speakers very much. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Now, Professor Mohit Kamal. Professor Mohit Kamal, sir, Salam sir, please unmute yourself, sir. Sir, please unmute.
Thank you, everybody. I am very much happy to see the presentation of the three presenters. Professor Kubir, he is very much known to me, and Professor Rumi, and most of all, my beloved student, now Associate Professor Dr. Halal. He is now playing the leading role in our country for the upliftment of the mental health issues and also developing a lot of plannings and resources in the country. So I am happy to see this big program from morning to 12. It is now knocking at the 12. So it's a great privilege to be attentive all the time. I was focusing the mind in three presentation. I was not being deviated a bit. So it is my pleasure that I have enjoyed the issues. But one thing is that we have some deficit in knowledge regarding mind or regarding stress. So if I can say something, what are the components of mind? We know our body, our physical health comprises lot of internal and external organs, heart, lung, kidney, liver. So we have the mind, we have some internal processes like perception, like motivation, like emotion, like memory, learning, thinking process, all along constituting the cognition. So you have mentioned, Professor Kabir mentions about the cognitive disruption, about the psychological disruption. Disruption means all components will be disrupted, perception will be disrupted. So if there is an altered perception, if we perceive an illness or event or image as threat, definitely there will be a production of the apprehension. If we have the apprehension, then we will go for attention-seeking behavior, we will go for the repeated reassurance, and there will be a physiological arousal, and the client will be focusing the mind in the body. Ultimately, perceived altered symptoms may lead to that I have a severe illness. This is a subjective, dangerous cognition. So I am going to die, and it will induce lot of physical disorders and also the mental disorder. I think Dr. Helal very, very efficiently presented everything. I have nothing to say. So we should correlate this mind and body, because we are connected with the body, and mind is very much connected to the autonomic nervous system. We know we have the sympathetic arousal and we have the parasympathetic action. So to cool down the arousal, we did the parasympathetic action. We can achieve this parasympathetic mimetic action from sympathetic arousal only by talking, only by releasing the emotional content from the client. If you can do this successfully, then medications is very much poorly needed to control the whole situation. So CBT is a great treatment procedure in this modern world, and I think you should advocate for clients having persistent fatigue syndrome. So disabling fatigue, though it is post-viral fatigue syndrome, or sometimes it is associated with the neurasthenia, or sometimes it is associated with ME, myasthenia, encephalitis. So we must exclude the other things also. And if you can conduct this CBT, I think it will get a good result along with our medication system. Thank you everybody for giving time. Thank you IPDI to invite me as a panelist here.
Thank you. Professor M.A. Sattar, Professor of Medicine, Chida Medical College. Professor M.A. Sattar.
Respected Chairman of the IPDI and respected Secretary General of IPDI, and my teacher, Professor Syed Atiqul Haq sir, and all of the learned panelists and the viewers, Assalamu alaikum. Actually, I'm very delighted and honored to join here. This is a very high-profile meeting, and I have seen all the three presentations is very excellent. Professor Ahmedul Kabir and Dr. Helaluddin Ahmed and Dr. Rumi Ahmed Khan, they have nicely delivered their lecture on the topic. It will be injustice to them if I add anything, while they had added almost all of the corners in their presentation. To say, I have seen one patient with mental health issue. The patient, while had recovered from the COVID, he was a banker, and in the few weeks, I think after 10 to 15 days, the gentleman committed suicide, hanging from the ceiling fan. I have witnessed this. That stricken me. How gentlemen of who didn't have previous mental health issues committed suicide at this moment. So it is striking me a lot. And today, Dr. Ahmed Helal has nicely focused on this issue, and also Dr. Ahmedul Kabir nicely mentioned the issues. And I am benefited out of discussion of Dr. Professor Mohit Kamal sir. And I am very much thankful to the organizer for allowing me to join the session. Actually, I have joined the session as a learner. So I am highly benefited out of it. I am very much thankful, and thank you very much for giving me the chance. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Just small comments from the Professor Ishaduddin Ahmed, Head of the Department of Jeddah Medical College. Professor Ishaduddin Ahmed. Just a few comments. Please unmute. Professor of Gastroenterology, Head of the Department of Jeddah Medical College.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, IPDI, and for this Akash gathering. This gathering is Am I audible?
Yes, yes, sure. You just.
Thanks to IPDI for arranging such a gorgeous seminar on time-demanding topics, Corona pandemic. All the speakers in this session and also in the previous session, I heard very excellent deliberation. I hope all the listener and learned audience will be helped by this discussion. Thanks to all the speakers for their speech, and thanks the arranger for this gathering. Thank you all.
Professor Ismail Patwari, sir. Professor Ismail Patwari, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me as a panelist. First of all, I congratulate the IPDI for arranging such a big workshop throughout from whole day to midnight. The 7 speakers already they have spoken on all the aspects of COVID infection, starting from Professor Rubed Amin to Dr. Helaluddin Ahmed. And Professor Rubed Amin is already spoken very nicely how to assess and how to refer and how to treat, especially for the frontline workers, especially those who are facing the frontline workers in the border area in the Khulna and Rajshahi divisions. So they should know when to treat and when a patient should be admitted in the hospital settings from Upazila level to divisional and the tertiary level hospital. And they have to define the mild cases, especially the oxygen saturation, respiratory rate, and when they should be admitted. And Dr. Tazmirul Islam very nicely narrated the cases. And Dr. Shondip Misra very nicely delivered a lecture about the oxygen requirement, starting from the nasal cannula, from the simple face mask to non-breather mask to that is the CPAP, BiPAP, and from the inclusive ventilation. So these will be very much helpful for the frontline fighters. And Chaudhry Hassan also, give a very important talk on rational approach. And also the Ahmadul COVID and the most important topic, that is the post-COVID complications, is a long COVID. And also he has mentioned about the recent invasive fungal infection. And Dr. Rumi Ahmed Khan actually very nicely mentioned about the vaccines and the concern already been discussed, especially whether pregnant lady can be taken the vaccine. So this is clear that the pregnant lady can take vaccine. And the second issue that is more important, whether 2 different type of vaccine can be taken. That is either the messenger RNA and the vaccine against the spike protein. So this is also an important issue in this situation. And Bangladesh already have a very low coverage and shortage of vaccine. So those who have got a first shot from the Oxford AstraZeneca, they can also take the vaccine from that is at present the Sinovac vaccine can be taken. And also Dr. Helaluddin Ahmed very nicely talk about the psychological aspect of the COVID-19, starting from the anxiety to the sleep disturbance. And many patients we are seeing, they're suffering a lot. That is, they are suffering from the anxiety disorder, also depression, also the sleep disturbance is a very important issue. And also the Professor Mohit Kamal also nicely talked about the relationship of the mind and body. So I hope all the participants up to this session, they will be very much benefited by these learned lectures, as well as the previous session or the case presentation. And I congratulate the IPDI for their extensive arrangement of such an topic that has covered all aspects of COVID-19 infection. So thank you very much for your this excellent arrangement. I congratulate all the organizers for arranging such a big issue. Thank you very much.
Now, the last comment from the Professor Rohit Amin. Professor Rohit Amin, your last comments.
Well, I mean, I'm not supposed to make any comments because it has been done very nicely by our teachers. But a few things to be said from on the respect for the government. And I will be saying that government will be very much happy to see the flourishing nature of the Professor M.A. Wadud Chaudhary and Professor Mohsen Ahmed to give the high voltage of the international conference in 2021. Possibly this one is the best one that we have arranged in the national as well as international arena. And my heartfelt thanks goes to everyone, not only the speakers or organizer, but also the panelists, those who have come from the home and abroad, and the extension of the people from around not only the part of the Asia, but also the Europe as well as the Americans. And they have given a tremendous support by giving their lectures, giving their highest quality of opinion, and sharing the experience of different locations. Seriously, it's a fantastic program. I enjoyed thoroughly. So big congratulations from the point of ours to all the organizers, and hopefully subsequently the scientific avenue that has been created by IPDI will be continued. Thanks from myself to give this opportunity to tell something as well as to listen something. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now the closing remarks will be given by Professor Dr. Abdul Wadud Chaudhary, sir.
It has been quite late. We are enjoying this session from 2:30 and night. We are entering a new day. We at the IPDI are extremely grateful to the faculties, to the panelists, to the speakers, and to the audience. Your kind presence, your presentations, your comments, all these inspire us to do more. COVID has taken away many freedom from us, but it has also given us freedom to use the digital technology to take us into a new horizon where knowledge is not space-bound, not limited to only a place where a student from Dhaka can only enjoy these big sessions, where a student from Kurigram, from Sunamganj, from Cox's Bazar can join these sessions together with all of us, where we, the seniors, can enjoy the lectures, the enlightening discussions from our peers quite freely, because COVID has taken the freedom to do many things, but it has given us the time to use our mental faculty to take us to a higher level. We are doing this together. We have been in this together. We are developing us together. And with that, we are actually become better professionals. That's the aim of IPDI. We are going to serve our nations better. And we promise from IPDI, we'll be trying to do more. We'll be involving all of you more and more. And we'll be asking for your help. Grow together. Thank you, everybody.
Now I'd like to request Dr. Mohsen Ahmed sir, Secretary General IPDA Foundation, to come on the dais for the vote of thanks.
I think we are reached 26th June. We start from the 25th June. Now it is 26th June. Dream is not that you see in sleep. Dream is something that does not let you sleep. তোমাকে যা ঘুমাতে দেয় না সেটাই স্বপ্ন আসলে we are IPDI with this team, I think with the panelists, expert from the home and abroad, with all supports of the technicians, journalists, media persons, we at least our dream comes true. এখানে কোনো এখন কোনো ফরেনার নেই আসলে ধন্যবাদটা বাংলা দিলেই মন থেকে দিতে পারি আমি বাংলায় দিচ্ছি আসলে আমরা হঠাৎ করে একদিন স্বপ্ন দেখলাম যে আমরা একটা কোভিড কনফারেন্স করব তখন সেকেন্ড ওয়েভ তুঙ্গে ছিল যখন আমরা চিন্তা করলাম যে এটা 25 জুন করব কোভিডেরটা অনেকটা কমে গেল কিন্তু আমাদের যে ধারণা ছিল আমাদের যে অ্যাডভাইজার আছেন প্রফেসর রেদওয়ান স্যার থেকে শুরু করে যারা আছেন সবাই যেগুলো তৃতীয় ওয়েভটা আসবে আমরা কিন্তু চলে আসছে আগামী সোমবার থেকে রবিবার দামিন ভাই ভালো বলতে পারবেন সোমবার থেকে লকডাউন হয়ে আছে সেই মুহূর্তে এই কনফারেন্সটি অত্যন্ত প্রাণবন্ত এবং আমাদের পার্টিসিপেন্টসের মাধ্যমে হয়েছে আমরা দেখেছি সবসময় পার্টিসিপেন্টসটা খুব আগ্রহ সহকারে ছিল এবং এত রাত পর্যন্ত পার্টিসিপেন্টরা 100 উপরে পার্টিসিপেন্ট আমার এখানেও অনেকে আছেন আমরা আইপিডিআই তাদের প্রতি কৃতজ্ঞ প্রথমে পার্টিসিপেন্টসের প্রতি কৃতজ্ঞ তাদের ধন্যবাদ আছে তাদের অংশগ্রহণ ছাড়া কোনোভাবেই আজকের অনুষ্ঠান হতো না তারা যেভাবে আমাদেরকে সাহায্য জুগিয়েছে ভবিষ্যতে আমরা আরো সামনে এগিয়ে যেতে পারবো তারপর উই রিয়েলি গ্রেটফুল টু আওয়ার প্যানেলিস্ট from the foreign faculties, also our home faculties. তারা যেভাবে আজকে from the morning beginning আমাদেরকে হেল্প করে আসছে especially our presenter speakers they done a tremendous job they prepared themselves even presenting slide presentation everything at the high level of presentation I see comments from our participants please give this presentation to us because it is like a copy for the textbook presentation. Thank you all the speakers and faculties. Thirdly, our Director General of Health Services, Professor Abul Bashar Mohammad Khurshid Alam sir, he will present in the inaugural session. Really grateful to him. Then my teams, Dr. Arifur Rahman Shajol, Dr. Motiur Rahman, Dr. Kuldir Khuda Babu, Dr. Nazmul, Dr. Selim Mahmood, and Dr. Shibli, Mr. Nozrul, Mr. Selim, and all the teams are doing a tremendous job last few weeks. আমি তাদেরকে বকেছি ভোকাবুকি করেছি রাত 3টা 4টা পর্যন্ত কাজ করেছি তাদেরকে নিয়ে we exams teams become true. Then Incepta Pharmaceuticals. Incepta last 2 years Incepta doing a tremendous job last 2 years. They did lots of work with us from but this conference they're doing a tremendous job is nicely lots of coordination never break the coordination from the till evening to night at 9 hours we have not seen any coordinated movement all the program is going on smoothly running for the Incepta and our Cloud Marcon is the event management they're doing tremendous job at last my chairperson Professor Abdul Adil sir is our mentor he did even the job our inspirers always with us till midnight he's at office this COVID pandemic you know everybody is in the room in our house but we are in the office so thanks Professor Abdul sir to be here and সবশেষে আমাদের আল্লাহ তাআলার কাছে এবং আমাদের ইয়ের কাছে ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি আল্লাহকে কৃতজ্ঞতা জানাচ্ছি যে আল্লাহ পাক আমাদেরকে সুস্থ রেখেছেন সবাইকে সুস্থ রাখুন ভালো থাকুন আমরা এই বলে আমরা বিদায় নিচ্ছি সবাই খোদা হাফেজ ভালো থাকুন সুস্থ থাকুন আল্লাহ পাক আমাদেরকে কোভিড থেকে মুক্ত রাখুন আমাদের কোভিড ধেয়ে আসছে আগামী সোমবার থেকে লকডাউন শুরু হচ্ছে আল্লাহ পাক এই বিপদ থেকে আমাদেরকে উদ্ধার করুন সবাইকে সুস্থ রাখুন ভালো থাকুন আল্লাহ হাফেজ থ্যাংক ইউ এভরিবডি গুড বাই সি ইউ নেক্সট অ্যাগেইন